Welcome everyone. Right, in this video, let's talk about AWS VPC Endpoint and PrivateLink. Okay, so have you ever wondered how a private EC2 instance can securely communicate with AWS services such as S3, Secret Manager, SQS, SNS, okay, without it actually going over the public internet? Okay, so normally what happens is if you have your private EC2 and you want to connect to such of these resources, because it's not the EC2 is not public, you need to either provision what we call NAT gateway for the traffic to be routed through the NAT gateway to the internet gateway, and then you can securely connect to your resources. Right. What about if you don't want to use the NAT gateway? Okay, the NAT gateway, there might be a reason because of cost or any other thing else you might don't want to use it. What is the alternative that you have? The alternative that we have, this is what we are talking about here, VPC endpoint. This is where it comes in. What does it do again? The endpoint allows resources inside your VPC, okay, to privately connect to AWS supported services without actually the network traversing over the public internet. Think about it. It is a private endpoint. You want to connect from your VPC, okay, your private VPC into what we call a public endpoint to access AWS services or a third party resources. You need what we call VPC endpoint or the private link. Okay, right. Again, let's look at this. In a normal scenario, if you do not have an endpoint, what is going to happen? And you have, let's say, NAT gateway. What is going to happen? Your EC2, when you provision your NAT gateway, is going to go via the NAT gateway to your internet gateway, and then it will be in the internet. So the internet, think about it, it's a public place. If you don't want to traverse over the public internet, okay, then you need to use the endpoint. So think about it. You have your AWS account, okay, you have your own private VPC. You provision your internet gateway, and let's say you have your NAT gateway, traffic will flow through your NAT gateway to your internet gateway, and then will be back into the public space, which is the public internet, and then you can access your S3 bucket. Okay, the connection will flow back again to the internet, to the internet gateway, to your EC2 instance, which is in a private subnet. Okay, this is the route. So your EC2 instance to your NAT gateway, to internet gateway, to the internet, and then access S3. The reverse connection will traverse back to your EC2. Right. What about for compliance sake? Okay. Or based on your business organization, you want everything to be secure, bottom down. You don't want to traverse over this internet. Okay. You want things to be within your VPC. Okay. Therefore, the alternative, more secure, so traffic is not traversing over the internet, is to use what we call endpoint. Okay, so with the endpoint, you stay within your VPC, you create an endpoint which will establish a private IP for the private IP, or what we call a private route. You can access your S3 or any other AWS resources that support VPC endpoint or private link. Okay, so that is the idea. You want to access your resources privately without going over the internet. You leverage on VPC endpoint. So with this, we have kind of two types of it, but I'll explain that in a minute. So again, you have your VPC, okay, it creates an endpoint and then a established connection for you to access your AWS supported services, okay, or any third party services. That is the endpoint. Okay, right. We have types of this endpoint. We have what we call the interface VPC endpoint. normally leverage on what we call the private link. The private link is a technology. If you go in the AWS account, you'll not be able to find a private link as a resource or service. It's just a technology AWS uses just to, explain or kind of leverage on that to provide a private connection from your VPC to AWS supported services. So with the VPC interface endpoint, okay, what it's going to do, it will create what we call ENI, so elastic network interface, on your subnet, or it will provide what we call the firewall, the security group that will help you provide what we call a private IP, and then it uses for most of this, some of this AWS service. Example is what we have here. So in a separate video, I will connect and kind of create an endpoint and access secret manager. So watch out for that video straight after this. Okay. Right. Again, this tells you what is going to happen. You have your EC2 in your private subnet. Okay, it's bound down. It doesn't have any public IP. So for you to connect to resources like Secret Manager, KMS, SQSNS, ECI, and so forth privately, you create an endpoint, which will create ENI interface endpoint. Okay, with that one will be created in your private subnet. You will be provisioned or you'll be given a public IP, sorry, private IP. This private IP, the EC2 instance will connect through that and then through your secret manager. And therefore, the connection inside of it will be private. It's not going to traverse over the internet. So that is it. Remember, the interface endpoint will create what we call ENI, okay? Provide private IP, okay, and this is what we will do. The next endpoint, it doesn't leverage on what we call the private link. By that I mean it does not provision what we call the ENI, the elastic network interface, okay, and this is mainly used for S3 and DynamoDB. For S3, again, you can use an interface endpoint, but mostly the gateway endpoint is used for S3 and DynamoDB purely. Okay, right. Again, remember, for the gateway VPC endpoint, it's going to create a route in your route table. Okay, in whatever route table you set up, there will be a route with S3 prefix in there. So again, you have your EC2, you want to access S3 bucket. Okay, remember, this S3 bucket it has public endpoint. You don't want to traverse over the internet. Okay, it will create a prefix in your route table, so your EC2 can connect via the route table, okay, and then you will be able to access your S3 bucket. Okay, so this is what the picture is trying to also explain here. So it will create what we call, so if you want to access it through an internet gateway, access your normal access. When your instance is in public subnet, you can connect to your internet gateway and straight you can connect to your S3 bucket or what we call your DynamoDB. Okay, right. But if it is private, if your EC2 is in a private subnet, what is going to happen is you will create what we call the interface. This will be the gateway endpoint, and with that gateway endpoint, it will create a route in the route table and you can access your resources. Okay, right. So this is what it kind of covers. If you log into your AWS account and you look for what we call VPC endpoint, these are the options that you have. I've done a separate video about the instant connect, so it comes under VPC endpoint, but that is something completely different. This is where you can privately SSH into a private EC2, which is in a private subnet. Is another way. We have various options, but this is one of them. But the rest is just an endpoint. We have your gateway endpoint, interface endpoint, powered by what we call the private link. Okay. Again, this is also shows you how the VPC network features is established by this endpoint. I hope this one helps somebody out there, and I will see you in my next video. The next video, what I will cover is to create what we call gateway endpoint and access S3 bucket, and then I'll also do a separate video create what we call VPC interface endpoint, and with that I will try and access secret key, not secret key, secret manager, secret basically. So please watch out for this. This video was just the concept. Watch out for this upcoming video. See you in my next video. Thank you for sticking out for that. Bye bye.